Alrighty. Welcome to another segment of Buddycast. On this episode, all we're talking about is Radio Gaga. We're talking radio with my good pal, Alan Carpenter, known as AC from Rocket 105. How you doing today, sir?
I am fine, my friend. Thank you for having me here.
Absolutely.
I'll tell you, it's funny, when you work in radio, a lot of times you think it's more interesting than it is. I know you're interested in it because we work together. Mm-hmm. But one thing people outside of radio don't usually want to hear is radio stories. So thank you for being interested.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what actually inspired you to go into radio?
It's kind of interesting. I grew up in Waterford. You know, I grew up in a small town with one traffic light. And there was a radio station at the time. It was an AM station. It was WRIE 1330. And it's located between Mill Creek and Waterford. But growing up in an environment like that, I didn't realize what a small operation it was. And this was the days of AM radio. This was the early 70s, and it's what my parents listened to. And they would have a morning show, and there was a news guy and two funny guys, and I just fell in love with it. I thought, what a cool way to make a living. Just, playing music and having a good time, and it's like it's show business, but it's local, and you don't have to move away. And so when I was a kid, I just, like a lot of radio people, I heard it. I wanted to do it. And then it wasn't much longer before I got really just curious about all the stations I could listen to and how far away, because at night, people don't remember AM radio, but at night with AM radio, you could hear stations from, if you lived in Erie, from Detroit and from Chicago and from New York City and Richmond, Virginia, and all over. So it was really something to fall in love with back then. Pre-internet, pre-cable TV, pre-everything.
Whoops, I think you might be a little frozen there.
Yeah, my wife just made a
cameo. 1 second, folks. I think we lost connection.
There she goes.
I'm sorry, I'm looking for my headset.
1 moment.
Did I unfreeze?
Sorry, folks. Technical glitch, I think. You there?
I'm here.
Okay. So sorry about that. We lost you for a second.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, I may have frozen, but I'm still a warm person.
There you go. There you go. You're like that one guy. Is it Mr. Freeze from Batman? Or?
Yes, I'm rather like Mr. Freeze.
Yep. So when did your career first begin in radio?
Well, I was lucky. I got a job in the business right out of school. I went to Mercyhurst, and I got out of school, and I immediately got a part-time job. And at the time, part-time jobs in radio meant you worked weekends. So I worked weekends, and I would be on the air overnights on Saturday nights, and I would play the syndicated shows. This was we had satellite shows, but listen to this, Nick. This is how old I am. They would send us like an oldies show called Dick Clark's Rock, Roll, and Remember on 4 vinyl albums. And you would play the vinyl albums and insert commercials. Archaic, old technology.
I know what you're talking about. I got some vinyl over here.
Yeah. Well, imagine them sending pre-recorded shows on it. It's crazy. It's great to listen to music on, but think of and believe me, there were so many problems with track skipping and broken records and everything else. It was the worst technology to play pre-recorded programs on, but that's what we had.
Did you also have to adjust all the knobs and everything to find like the right tone? And
Oh yeah. It was all manual, all analog, or mostly analog. I remember they taught us to do the meter readings. You'd have to read the meters to stay within the FCC limits of signal strength. And Nick, these looked like something out of like a laboratory from an old Godzilla movie. Big as a refrigerator, big knobs on them, and not digital readouts, but actual meters going back and forth. It was just a lot of old technology was still being used then. It was old then, and now it would be antique.
The one scene that comes to my mind when you mention that, you've seen Spaceballs before, right?
Sure.
The one scene when the guy's reading the radar and he's like, I lost all the things. I lost all the bleep bleeps and the bloop bloops and everything. If something were to ever go wrong.
That's exactly what it was. Exactly. And it worked about as well.
All right. So you mentioned vinyl. What are some of your favorite songs to play on the air today?
You know what's funny? I have been on Rocket for 11 years. I think it's 11 or 12 years now. And when I started on Rocket, I was like a casual Led Zeppelin fan. Now I'm a Led Zeppelin maniac. So I love playing Led Zeppelin on the air. And there are a lot of bands that, like Shinedown is a good example. A band that sort of had started when I went on the air, and they were pretty good. Their first single was a Leonard Skinner cover. And I have watched that band grow over the past 10 years, and the songwriting is better and the playing is better, and they've become such a great band. So I love bands like that sort of I can trace back to when I started on Rocket, and watch them grow and develop. But yeah, I especially love the classic stuff. I love 70s rock and roll. I love Led Zeppelin and Boston and Cheap Trick and all those bands. I really do. But there's a lot of great music still out there. I love the fact that in rock and roll, there's still a lot of guitars. I'm a guitar person. So even with the modern bands, there's a lot of guitar in the music, and pop music doesn't have very much guitar at all. So I'm glad I'm a rock DJ.
Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to throw in a new question here. When did you begin your career with Rocket 105, your current radio station?
Oh my God. You know what? I wish I could tell you the exact day or I can't even tell you the year. I think it was 12 years ago, 12 or 13 years ago. Mm-hmm. Here's how I know. I will have been married 12 years this month, or 10 years this month. And I know I was on the air at Rocket. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Well, my wife deserves the applause for putting up with me for that long. But yes, that's right. Applaud for her. But I know I was on Rocket 2 or 3 years before I got married. I know I was courting my wife and getting to know her, and so forth and so on. So I think it's been 12 or 13 years.
All right.
It's been a long time. And what's interesting is, this is a story I always tell. When I was in college, I had a professor say to me, you're pretty good at radio, but if you want to do it, you're going to be moving your whole life. That's the way the business is. You'll be going from market to market, building a career. And I have been steadily on air in Erie since 1989. I've never had to move.
Wow.
It's really interesting. Mm-hmm. I like to think some of it was talent, but a lot of it was luck. It was just how things fell together.
Yeah. I was going to say, especially with all the changes that have been made.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting up until this point is my job it's changed so much. I started off as an oldies DJ. Then I was a country DJ. Then I did talk radio. Then I did news. Then I did news and top 40. Then I did oldies. Then I did the Bob format. And then I did rock. So it's just, they threw a lot of stuff at me, and hopefully I managed to do most of it fairly well.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of changes, how has the radio industry changed over your time, like over your career? Like, what have you done?
Boy. Over the career, I'll tell you what, as far as the number of people, it's a vastly reduced number of people who get it done. Because like a lot of things, a lot of functions are done either by a computer, or they're done non-locally. They're centrally done by a bigger company and sent down. But a lot of us who have survived, have had to learn to, learn to cover more bases. I remember when I started in radio, and I was always a fairly hardworking guy, and I would work with guys who would be on the air, and the rest of the time would be, this is, back then, smoking cigarettes, hanging out, joking around. And I thought, well, wow, you guys, once you're not on the air, you don't really do much. That's not true of almost anybody now. Everybody gets off the air and is doing a lot of stuff. They're either voice tracking other shifts, or they're doing commercials, or they're, preparing endorsements, or this, that, and the other thing. There's a lot to do now, and less people. But that goes for every business. I just feel like I'm lucky to still be working.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, do you have any favorite memories from your time in radio? Like any?
Oh, I'll tell you, Nick, it's all about meeting musicians. I mean, I've gotten to meet and hang out with everybody from Twisted Sister to the Four Tops. And so many of those bands were so cool and so great to meet and so nice. Back in my oldies days, the Temptations, really legendary people that you get to not only introduce, but hang out backstage with and talk to and really get to know. And then in, my Rocket era, meeting Kiss. I was a Kiss fan when I was a kid. I still am, but I mean, back then I lived and breathed Kiss. And then to meet Kiss and to, hang out backstage with Kiss in their full makeup and in the full costumes. It was just a surreal experience. So for me, a lot of it has been that stuff. I'm just really the biggest music fan in the world. So, that's it's not something that is, advances my career. It just is pure joy. It's just a blessing.
Mm-hmm. Now, quick follow-up to that. Have you ever seen Kiss without their makeup on?
I have not. I have not. I know people who have. I know people who, it's funny, I was talking to your friend and mine, Greg, and Greg had seen Kiss do a show without the makeup back in that era. And then he saw Kiss the last time they were in Erie. And Greg said, there's no comparison. It's just such a better show when they're in the makeup and the full thing. So it's kind of interesting that, I think a lot of bands, those older bands, have gone back to their strengths and said, we know who our audience is. It's interesting to me with older bands like Kiss or Kansas or Cheap Trick or so forth. Now they have a small fan base that they really make a living by doing shows, selling merch, and to a lesser degree, selling music. People download an album or buy a CD if you still like physical media, but that's not the main source of their bread and butter. It's mainly concerts and merch, and it's sort of fun to be a lifelong fan of bands like that. And Rush too, before Neil Peart passed away.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know you mentioned Kiss and Led Zeppelin, but are there any other bands that you follow? Like any other bands that you say you live and breathe? Or
oh wow, there's so many. I mean, I'm a lifelong Beatle nut, and Beatle trivia. I'm a Beatle trivia nut to a very annoying degree. Very annoying to people. There's so many. The Who, I love the Who, and I love. There's so much. I like all kinds of music. My default is rock, but I really love all kinds of music. I everything from jazz to classical, to what they call world music. I love a lot of the traditional music of Indonesia that my wife introduced me to. I love music from India. I just absolutely live and breathe music.
Sweet.
Now I play guitar, but you don't want to hear that, believe me, because that will mean you will no longer enjoy music. So I want to keep your joy pure.
Yeah, we'd love to hear it one time, Why not? Give our fans a little excitement for the day.
There you go. Well, yeah, excitement in scare quotes.
Mm-hmm. A little wake-up call, a little afternoon wake-up call.
Little afternoon wake-up call. But it's like you in comedy, Nick. I mean, you knew. It's just you love it so much that you want to in some way be involved with it. And I think part of me being in radio was I knew music was going to mean so much to me that I wanted to be in some industry where I'd at least be connected. I can't really sing very well. I don't play guitar very well. I suppose I could have been in band management or something, but I just knew I wanted to be connected to music somehow. If I could, if I could be lucky enough to have a living in a field connected to music, I wanted it.
Yeah, most definitely. Now, part of radio is also doing interviews, kind of like what we're doing now. Have there ever been any that have left a deep impact on you, or that you just walked out of the studio just going, wow?
I had, back when the Malcolm X movie was out, and I was doing talk radio, I had an interview with Malcolm X's brother, Abdulaziz Omar. And I was a young guy at that time. I was probably 24. And I was nervous because this is not like talking to a guy down the street.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember at the end of the interview, he said, "You're a very intelligent young man." But I still carry that around as a matter of pride. Like, oh, that's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the funny thing is, to be perfectly honest with you, what I discovered I get so many types of interviews thrown at me. They'll be political, or they'll be paid programs where you're highlighting a client and what they do. And after a while, I kind of thought, you know what, I'm actually pretty good at this. So I think that was really the impact, was figuring out after a while that I was not bad at it, and I could do it, and that I could handle it. There's some things in life that you just don't grab the brass ring. And then when you're forced to do it repeatedly, you go, you know what, I'm not bad at this. I think that was the major impact for me.
That's awesome. Now let's go back in time a little bit more, because you mentioned
there's a lot of time. I'm in my 50s. There's a lot of time to go back to, Nick.
Let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to. Well,
I was born at St. Vincent. Okay, not back that far.
Yeah, let's go back to college age, or yeah. So, if you were to go back in time, back when you were just starting to get interested in radio,
mm-hmm.
What would you tell yourself today? Like say we built a time machine and you got a chance to talk with yourself.
I would tell myself, have more faith in your own abilities. Again, there were a lot of things in my career where I sort of discovered baptism by fire, that I was not bad at what I did. I'm pretty good at it. In fact, in college, that's an interesting one, because I was the news director for the college radio station, and I had an assistantship to do it. And I happened to be on the air the afternoon the Challenger exploded. And we had a news wire at the time, and it would send down stories. And I was continually updating throughout the afternoon for, 3 or 4, probably 3 hours, while the information was still coming in. And a lot of people, faculty and otherwise, said to me the next day, they're like, "Wow, you sounded really good. You were doing a great job at that." And that's something, again, that I wouldn't have jumped out and said, I can cover breaking events. But I happened to be there when that tragedy happened, and I discovered that I was able to do that. So I would probably tell myself that, I think. I think a lot of us wish we had a better sense of our own abilities when we were younger. But of course, we're still testing the waters. We don't know what we're capable of yet, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All righty. I think I'm going to wrap it up with these 2 next questions.
Okay.
What's your advice for someone who would tell you they want to go into the radio industry today? Say comm majors, or just the average.
I would say, number one, really educate yourself about the world, because now more than ever, with so many podcasts and so many sources of information, you cannot have a narrow focus. You don't know, if you have a long radio career, and you're fortunate to have one as I did, you don't know what's going to be thrown at you, what you're going to have to know a little bit about. You can't, none of us can be experts on everything, but know a little bit about politics, know a little bit about other countries, know a little bit about, art, know a little bit about religion, know a little bit about sports, even know a little bit about soccer, which no Americans know about. Know a little bit about those things. I would say kind of give yourself educate yourself in a very general way. Be very curious. The more curious you are in your life, the better you will be on the radio, because you'll have more to talk about. And you'll be more original.
Absolutely.
And I would also say learn to be versatile, learn versatility.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite team, the Blue Jays, just acquired a great guy in the draft yesterday, and part of what makes him special is he's useful in so many ways on a baseball team. I think it's the same thing, because you might say, well, I just want to be a DJ, or I just want to be a news person, but you don't know, in your career you'll have other things thrown at you. But there may be jobs that you haven't even imagined yet. You know, like I may be starting my own podcast sometime later this year. Well, that didn't exist when I started in radio. There wasn't such a technology. So, yeah, be versatile.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember back in my days, it was, oh, I'm just going to go work promotions that day. All of a sudden, Mr. Malpudi or Mr. Lange called me back. I need you for something. And I'm over here going, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do?
Yeah, yeah. There's a Nick, as well. There's a lot of times like that in the radio business.
Hey, we're gonna put you on. We're gonna put you on the control board today for the live remotes. Sitting there like
you are.
Yeah, like sitting there with the guy next to me. Okay, so we hit this button. This button. Okay, why is that red light going on? Is that good?
Yeah. There's a lot of those moments. I've had 30 plus years of them. They haven't stopped yet.
I remember one time I was in the control room and everything just froze up. Like the computer froze or something and everything just went dead. And I'm like,
yep,
that's not good.
Yeah.
Thankfully, Woody was in the area. Like he's walking by and I'm like,
well, that's when we remind ourselves that we're not cardiac surgeons. Dead air is only dead in a figurative sense. So, you got to keep it in perspective. But I mean, didn't you find that with radio, Nick, that it's there? It's so, and it's fun in a way, but it's also drives you nuts because it's so dynamic. It's every day is like, well, what's today's challenge? This morning I went into work. I had everything ready to go, and we'd had a power surge overnight, so half the computers were down, and the audio boards, the settings were all back to defaults. And you just have to manage day to day.
Absolutely. It was definitely one of those jobs that even after they were like, well, that could have gotten a lot better. You still left afterwards just thinking to yourself, I work in the best industry,
Yeah, that's it exactly. That's it exactly.
I honestly remember being in promotions, and the minute my classes were right across the street, like literally if you open up a window from Games Communication Building and throw a rock across the street, you might be hitting David Hugar's office,
Yeah, right. It's right there.
Yeah, exactly. So I remember just like the minute classes were done, I would just fly over and have people like Greg and Ted tell me, you're early. Go get some lunch. Go do something. I'm like, I'm ready to work. Let's get this show on the road. They're like,
sure.
Please go get some lunch. Come back at you. We're fine. We got this under control. Just go get some lunch or something.
Yeah.
It'd be like noon at that time, so I'd just be sitting at like the student cafe or sitting at like what's the place? The sub shop down there. Like not Subway, but the place I always went to all the time down on Perry Square, and just sitting there going, okay, I got 2 hours to kill.
Right.
Might as well people watch or something. So.
Well, that's, you know what, though, that brings up another thing about radio that's interesting. It's one of those feast or famine things, too. And either you have 5 things in an hour to do it, or you have 90 minutes with nothing to do. It's just how it is. It's never steady. It's always off and on.
Absolutely. All right. Now my final question for you.
All right. Is this a tough one? Am I going to be like really intimidated by this one? Or?
I hope you were taking notes. That's all. Okay. So, what are any final comments, any remarks you have on radio? Like just anything for all our viewers out there that explains why you love radio so much?
I will tell you, I have an answer to that is kind of timely, I think. Because before the pandemic, people were saying, and the general consensus was, well, radio's fine, but it's starting to fade away. It's one of those technologies that's kind of going away, and local programming's okay, but I don't know how much longer we can continue. This was just across the industry. And what they found is during the pandemic, especially at Rocket, but other stations as well, our streaming numbers went through the roof because people said, we're scared, we're uncertain, we want companionship, we want it to be local. And what iHeart did that was really smart, they said, okay, you guys, well, this is going on, especially in the initial month or two, stay on the air later because people are getting up later because they're not going to work, they're working from home. And we did. And it was like it really reminded me of that. It's that connection that radio has that really nothing has quite like radio. And it was very gratifying to me to think that people in the midst of this pandemic, and they've got kids and they're worried about their kids and they're worried about what's going to happen and, job losses and everything else and job changes, that they said, at least we have these two idiots on the radio. We know they're there and we can rely on them. And that just meant the world to me. It really, even though I've had really aggravating days, it really reassured me as to the value of what I do and what we do. So I would say it's a really good reminder to me. And that connection, it reestablished a connection that reminded me of why I do this in the first place.
Most definitely. Most definitely. You can catch my friend AC here on the morning show at Rocket 105. And thank you so much for coming on today. It was a great pleasure. It was great learning about your career. And
thank you, my friend.
I wish you guys the best. I miss you guys every day, but
we miss you too, Nick. You're the man. And you showed up early for work, which nobody does.
Absolutely. My pleasure. So,
thank you, sir.
All right. Thanks for joining us today, man.
Yep. You have a great day, sir.
You too. You too.